Today I'm going to try and hit that target with this rifle. That's 300 yards with the Baker. All patterns of Baker rifle, and there were 4 of them, were sighted to a maximum of 200 yards. Contemporary texts and information, as discussed in DeWitt Bailey's British Military Flintlock Rifles, indicates that shooting at 300 yards was commonplace, and was the preserve of the better shots in a battalion of rifles. There were 2 main limitations going into this shoot that stood out. 1, the capabilities of the round ball at this and greater range, and 2, the sight's ability to accommodate shooting at a greater range than they were designed for. The loads used in this practice were the same as in previous practices: 95 grains of 2F powder and a thick cotton patch of .022 in thickness. So the purpose of today's practice is not necessarily to shoot the middle out of the target. Judging by past practice, that's not going to happen anyway. But the conditions today are a little bit blustery, nice weather, but windy. And that's going to wreak havoc, I can anticipate, with that little round ball at 300 yards. In fact, conditions were so windy that after the initial 2 fouling shots, the target had blown over. I had to secure the target both to the front and to the rear with some rope. As mentioned, I started the practice with firing 2 fouling shots to make sure the barrel was warm and the fouling was consistent. Knowing from my experiments at 200 yards that the 200-yard leaf shot to the point of aim, I elected to use a modified sight picture with the base of the sight and the top of the barrel visible in the notch of the 200-yard leaf. This was combined with aiming at the top of the target. As with previous accuracy experiments, I used a rest for best consistency. As you can see from these examples, I found the rounds to be striking quite a bit high over the target. So, in the interests of making a systematic approach, I used the 200-yard setting and aimed at the bottom, with the idea that the rounds would hit the ground well in front of the target and I could walk them in. This proved to be correct, and the rounds were considerably low. I began working my way up the target, using the 200-yard setting, aiming at the middle of the target. The point of impact was necessarily raised, although still hitting the ground in front of the target, not to the same degree, however, as the previous experiment. Noticing too that the rounds were hitting with a slight bias to the left, I elected to raise the point of aim to the top right corner of the target with the 200-yard leaf. As is the case with much black powder shooting, I was confronted with a bewildering example of rounds flying not where I was anticipating. Generally, though, the rounds were striking slightly right of the target. Again, being systematic, I aimed at the top left corner of the target. As anticipated, the rounds did strike to the left, though for the most part they were quite close to the target. Though by this time it seemed rather intuitive and obvious, shooting at the top center of the target with the 200-yard leaf seemed to provide decent results. After a number of sighting rounds, I settled down and shot a 15-round group. At this range, and because I was shooting alone, the only way to check to see if the bullets were hitting where I was intending them to was to film every single shot and then review the footage on the camera. There were an infuriating number of rounds that didn't create any sort of splash whatsoever, and I probably fired upwards of 30 rounds in the process of trying to get on hitting the target. At 300 yards, it was out of the question trying to see bullet holes in the target. So, in reviewing the footage of every shot, if the splash and or dust that had been kicked up by the bullet strike came from behind the target, I knew that I had at least hit somewhere on the screen. The rifle certainly showed its capabilities, and the round ball its limitations at this range. There was certainly no pinpoint accuracy, as you can see with these examples of strikes through the screen. That said, the target was about 5 feet high, and therefore represented the general shape of perhaps 2 men standing together, or at least 1 man through the center line. Reviewing the footage during the shoot seemed to indicate that although the rounds were in fact hitting the target, due to the splash coming from behind, they were low, and this would prove to be the case when I came up and examined the target.
Well, that's some interesting results. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hits out of 15, not including the warm-up. They're all pretty much center line, except for this one over here. I suspect that they're all, because they're all low, that more than likely the other 6 rounds or so that I shot probably went into the dirt here. There's some evidence of some bullet strikes here. Definitely a great place to start. But on the same token, a lot more work's required. I'm pretty happy with the first attempt, but it'll get better. If this target represented a man, he wouldn't be happy right now.
So the main takeaways I got from this practice, and the wind conditions notwithstanding, were that the rifle was shooting decently for line. The rounds all impacted generally in the center of the target. But on the other hand, they were low, and I'll have to adjust the sight picture and find a happy medium between this and this. So I suppose the overarching question is how these results compare to the story of Rifleman Plunket. Could he have shot 2 men at 300 yards with 2 rounds? Judging by the group size on the target at 300 yards, I could say that yes, 2 hits with 2 rounds on 2 different men is and was possible. As for the myth of Rifleman Plunket, 800 yards range, 2 headshots in sequence, I highly doubt that. Anything could happen once, but not twice.